The average EV buyer saves $10,000 in fuel over 5 years and loses $11,000 in costs nobody showed them before they signed. What EV manufacturers and dealers never put in the comparison calculator is 4 costs that start on day 1 and compound every single year. I ran the full 5-year math on a $52,000 EV purchased in 2025 using data from LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Edmunds, and Recurrent Auto's analysis of over 15,000 tracked EVs. And I found the 5 specific conditions where an EV is genuinely the right financial decision, and the 5 costs that silently destroy the math for everyone outside those conditions. The insurance gap. Nobody quotes you before you sign. Every EV comparison calculator on every manufacturer's website shows you the same 2 numbers: what you pay for gas now versus what you will pay for electricity. What none of them show is the insurance column, and that omission is costing EV buyers $1,500 to $2,000 in unplanned spending before the 5-year ownership window closes. EV insurance premiums run between 10 and 30% higher than equivalent gas vehicles depending on the model, the insurer, and the driver's location. On a vehicle insured at $1,800 per year for a gas equivalent, a 20% increase is $360 per year in additional cost before the car moves an inch. For high-end EV models, particularly large luxury SUVs and performance variants, some insurers are now quoting premiums $800 to $1,200 per year above comparable gas vehicles. A handful of carriers are declining these models outright. Here is what makes this criminal. The reason for the premium is structural, not temporary. The battery pack is integrated into the chassis floor. A collision that a gas vehicle absorbs through conventional bodywork can cause battery damage that is invisible from the outside and requires $8,000 to $15,000 in component replacement. The repair network for high-voltage systems is still a fraction of the general collision market. Fewer qualified shops means less competitive labor pricing and longer wait times. In 2024, LexisNexis Risk Solutions published data showing EV claim frequency was 17% higher than for passenger vehicles overall. Insurers are not overcharging out of caution. They are pricing to documented loss data. Over 5 years, the insurance gap on a mainstream EV runs $1,500 to $2,000 above a comparable gas vehicle. That is the first line the comparison calculator omitted. The next one is something most EV buyers do not think about until they are rotating tires and the shop hands them a replacement estimate. The tire bill that arrives faster than you expect. EVs are heavy. A Tesla Model Y weighs approximately 4,400 pounds. A Toyota RAV4 with a nearly identical footprint weighs roughly 3,900 pounds. That 500-pound difference sits directly on 4 contact patches the approximate size of a human hand, and the physics of that weight translate directly into accelerated tire wear that no EV manufacturer puts in the ownership cost comparison. Consumer Reports and J.D. Power's long-term ownership studies have both documented EV tire wear running 20 to 30% faster than equivalent tires on comparable gas vehicles. On a tire that might last 40,000 miles on a gas car, an EV owner is looking at 28,000 to 32,000 miles before replacement becomes necessary. There is a compounding factor specific to EVs. Instant torque delivery from a standing stop applies disproportionate stress to the rear contact patches, regardless of whether the driver considers themselves aggressive. The physics apply whether you notice them or not. Here is what makes this criminal. EV-specific tires, which many manufacturers require to meet load rating and rolling resistance specifications, cost more than standard tires. A replacement set for a Tesla Model Y or a Hyundai Ioniq 5 runs. It's $900 to $1,400 installed depending on brand and location. When you account for the accelerated wear cycle, the additional annual tire cost for an EV owner versus a gas car owner on equivalent vehicles runs $200 to $400 per year across the ownership period. That is not in any comparison calculator either. Sandra Reyes, Denver. Used EV fleet appraiser, 9 years. Tire costs are the first thing I check when I am appraising a used EV with 40,000 miles on it. Most of them need a full set within the next 8,000 to 10,000 miles. The owners almost always say they did not expect to be there this fast. The weight and the torque curve make the math completely different from what they were used to. $200 to $400 per year in additional tire cost, compounding on top of the insurance gap. The fuel savings are still running, but the gap between savings and hidden cost is narrowing with every billing cycle. The next cost on this list is one that appears before you drive the car home for the first time. The home charger installation bill nobody tells you is coming. Every EV advertisement shows a car plugged in overnight at home. The implied message is simple. Park it, plug it in, wake up to a full charge. What those advertisements do not show is the electrician's invoice that makes that image possible, or the line item on the invoice that shows up when your existing electrical panel cannot support what you are asking it to do. Level 2 home chargers. Charger installation runs $800 to $2,500 depending on where your main panel is relative to the garage, whether your local permitting requires licensed work, and what the labor market looks like in your city. If your panel is at or near capacity, which is common in homes built before 2000, the charger installation requires a panel upgrade that adds $1,500 to $3,000 on top of the charger cost itself. Total potential day one cost: $4,500 before the car has charged once. Here's what makes this criminal. This cost does not appear in any EV comparison calculator on any manufacturer's website. The comparison shows electricity versus gasoline. It assumes you have a functional level 2 charging setup at home before you buy. If you do not, the assumption itself is a $800 to $4,500 line item that appears the week after you take delivery. Manufacturers advertise charging at home overnight as a feature. They do not disclose the prerequisite cost of making that feature available in your specific house. Michelle Park, Nashville, 2024 Chevrolet Equinox EV, purchased for $38,000. Got 3 quotes for level 2 installation after delivery. Panel was at capacity. Lowest all-in quote, $3,100. The dealer said I just needed a charger. They did not ask about my panel. I wish they had. I would have factored that into the comparison before I signed. $800 to $4,500 is the range for a cost that appears on day one and that no comparison calculator accounts for. Added to the insurance gap and the tire acceleration, the fuel savings are now under real pressure, and the next cost on this list turns the fuel savings calculation itself into a variable that can disappear entirely depending on where you charge. Public DC fast charging, which costs almost as much as gas. The fuel savings case for EV ownership rests on one assumption: that you charge at home. The national average residential electricity rate is approximately 16 cents per kilowatt hour. At that rate, the cost per mile on a mainstream EV is genuinely around 1/3 of what a gasoline car pays at current pump prices. That math is real, and for drivers who charge exclusively or primarily at home, it holds. DC fast charging at a public station is a different number. Current rate cards from ChargePoint, Electrify America, and Tesla Supercharger show per-session rates running 40 cents to 55 cents per kilowatt hour in 2025, depending on network, location, and whether you carry a monthly subscription. At 48 cents per kilowatt hour against gasoline at $3.50 per gallon in a car getting 25 miles per gallon, the EV's per-mile fuel cost advantage narrows to a fraction of what the comparison calculator showed. In some markets and charging scenarios, an EV fueled primarily at public DC stations costs more per mile to run than a comparable gas vehicle. Here is what makes this criminal. There are 2 overlapping problems that manufacturers never disclose together. First, DC fast charging accelerates battery degradation. Recurrent Auto's analysis of over 15,000 tracked EVs identified frequent DC fast charging as one of the primary factors associated with above-average capacity loss over time. Second, the owners who rely most heavily on public fast charging are specifically the owners in apartments, condominiums, or older urban housing without dedicated parking, which is also the demographic where the home charging assumption is least realistic. The buyer who needs public charging most is simultaneously paying more per kilowatt hour and degrading their battery faster than the buyer who charges slowly at home overnight. Both costs are invisible at purchase time. When the fuel cost advantage narrows or disappears, the insurance gap, the tire cost, and the charger installation cost are left standing with nothing to offset them. The next cost on this list is the one that does the most damage in dollar terms, and the one that takes the longest to see coming. EV depreciation, which outpaces gas cars by $8,000 over 5 years. Depreciation is the largest single cost in vehicle ownership for most drivers, gas or electric. It does not send you a bill. It does not show up on a maintenance record. It arrives on the day you try to sell. And for EV owners who did not buy the right model at the right time, it is the cost that absorbs everything the fuel savings delivered and then keeps going. Edmunds' 2024 5-year ownership cost analysis found that EVs carry, on average, $8,000 more in 5-year resale losses than comparable gas vehicles. Gas cars depreciate primarily on mileage, condition, and age. EV depreciation is shaped by those same factors, plus battery health, plus the pace at which the manufacturer's technology has advanced since your purchase. When a manufacturer releases a new version with 30% more range and a revised software platform 18 months after you signed, your current model loses residual value immediately because the comparison point has moved. Buyers choosing between your 2-year-old EV and the new version at a modest premium will typically take the new one because the battery starts fresh, the warranty clock resets, and the technology is out current. The first-year depreciation on certain EV models reached 50% in 2023 when improved versions arrived quickly after the original purchase window. A $55,000 vehicle worth $27,500 12 months later. No fuel savings calculation survives that math. and manufacturers know their product roadmap at the time you buy. They do not disclose it. Sarah Martinez was the driver in California. She bought a Tesla Model Y in 2022 for $64,000 to escape gas prices and calculated $2,400 per year in fuel savings. At the 4-year mark, Edmunds pegged her current model's resale value at $29,000, a $35,000 depreciation loss against a comparable Toyota RAV4 that had lost $22,000 over the same period. The $13,000 depreciation gap consumed 5 years of fuel savings and added an additional $1,000 in unrecovered cost. I ran the fuel savings math 3 different ways before I bought. I never ran the resale math. I did not know it was going to matter this much. Before I give you the 5 conditions where EV ownership genuinely wins the math, subscribe now. The checklist coming next is the reason most EV buyers get this wrong. They never see it until after they sign. What comes next is the tool that changes that. Those 5 costs are real. They are documented by LexisNexis, Edmunds, Recurrent Auto, and J.D. Power. And for buyers who did not check them before signing, they are painful in a way that is difficult to reverse, but they are also avoidable. Not for every buyer, but for buyers who run 5 specific questions before committing. The 5-year math does flip for the right buyer in the right situation. Here is exactly who that buyer is. You charge 90% or more at home on an off-peak rate. The fuel savings case for EV ownership is genuinely strong when the underlying assumption is true. At 16 cents per kilowatt hour on a standard residential rate and below 10 cents per kilowatt hour on overnight off-peak time of use pricing that many utilities offer specifically for EV charging, the per-mile fuel cost is a third to a quarter of what a comparable gas vehicle costs. Over 15,000 miles per year, that is $1,200 to $2,400 in annual savings that lands in your bank account. The condition is a home with dedicated parking, a compatible electrical panel that does not require an upgrade, and access to an off-peak rate from your utility provider. Drivers who meet all 3 criteria have the fuel savings the comparison calculator promised. Drivers who meet 2 of 3 have a partial version of those savings. Drivers who meet none are funding their fuel budget at public DC rates. Carlos Rivera, Phoenix, 2021 Chevrolet Bolt, purchased for $31,000 used, charges at home on an Arizona Public Service off-peak rate of 9 cents per kilowatt hour between midnight and 6 a.m. Annual fuel cost versus his previous Honda Civic, $780 versus $2,100. Actual annual savings, $1,320. 4-year total, $5,280 saved. No panel upgrade required. I did the math before I bought. I called the utility, got the actual off-peak rate, checked my panel. The numbers held. They still hold. If home charging at a favorable rate describes your situation, the fuel savings are real and recurring. The next condition stacks directly on top of them. You drive 18,000 or more miles per year. The insurance premium gap, the tire wear acceleration, and the charger installation cost are largely fixed across ownership. They do not scale with mileage. The fuel savings do. A driver covering 18,000 to 25,000 miles per year at home charging rates generates $1,600 to $3,200 in annual fuel savings versus the $1,200 to $2,400 that a 15,000-mile driver generates. The additional savings widen the gap between what the hidden costs take and what the fuel efficiency returns. J.D. Power's 2023 EV ownership satisfaction data identified high-mileage drivers as the demographic most consistently satisfied with EV total cost of ownership after the first 3 years. The reason is arithmetic. Fixed cost disadvantages diminish as a percentage of total ownership cost when the variable savings are running higher. Patricia Okonkwo, Houston, 2023, Tesla Model 3. Long range purchased for $47,000. Commutes 95 miles per day, charges at home. Annual mileage 22,000. Annual fuel savings versus her previous Toyota Camry, $2,900 at current home charging rates. 3-year total savings, $8,700. Insurance premium gap, $420 per year. Tire replacement cost, aligned with expectation. At my mileage, the savings are real every month. High mileage driving is where this genuinely works. Your electrical panel needs no upgrade. The charger installation cost that blindsided the buyers in the avoid section lands hardest on homeowners with older panels. A house built after 2000 with a 200 amp panel and available breaker slots needs an $800 to $1,200 level 2 charger. Install and nothing else. The prerequisite is already met. Before signing for any EV, one call to a licensed electrician for a panel assessment eliminates the largest day one cost uncertainty in EV ownership. That call costs nothing. The assessment itself typically runs $75 to $150. If the panel clears, the charger installation is a line item, not a surprise. If it does not, the buyer has the information they need to factor the upgrade into the purchase decision rather than discover it after delivery. Marcus Webb, Sacramento. Licensed electrician, 17 years. The buyers who call me before they buy the car are the ones who have a smooth experience. The buyers who call me after are the ones who are upset. A 200 amp panel built in the last 20 years almost always clears. The call takes 20 minutes and removes the single biggest installation uncertainty before any money changes hands. You bought a model with proven strong resale history. Not all EVs depreciate at the same rate. The Chevrolet Bolt consistently holds residual value better than its original market position suggested, because the purchase price was modest, the technology iteration cycle was relatively slow, and the total cost of ownership at lower price points attracted buyers who stretched less to acquire it. The Tesla Model 3 long range has demonstrated stronger resale retention than early Model S and X variants, because the platform has matured and the buyer pool is deeper. Edmunds True Cost to Own data, updated quarterly, shows 5-year projected resale values for every mainstream EV on the market. Checking this number before signing is the equivalent of the Carfax check before buying a used car. It takes 5 minutes, and it is the difference between a depreciation loss that is in line with a gas vehicle and one that exceeds it by $8,000. Angela Torres, Denver, 2020, Chevrolet Bolt, purchased for $21,500 used. Sold at 68,000 miles for $14,200. Depreciation over 3 years, $7,300. Comparable 3-year depreciation on a Toyota Corolla at equivalent purchase price $6,900. Gap, $400. I did the Edmunds research before I bought. The Bolt's resale curve was the most predictable EV I could find at that price point. I bought the data, not the brand. You run the 5-question checklist before signing, not after. Every buyer on the avoid list had access to the same information the winners used. The difference was not luck, it was sequence. The winners ran the numbers before committing. The buyers on the avoid list ran them after the ink was dry, if they ran them at all. Here's the checklist. 5 questions. Each one removes a specific cost uncertainty before it becomes an expensive surprise. Question 1. What is your actual insurance quote, not an estimate, before you sign? Call your insurer with the exact VIN or model trim. Target, no more than $400 per year above your current vehicle. Above $600 per year, recalculate the 5-year savings math with that number in it. Question 2. What does level 2 charger installation cost at your specific address given your current panel? Get an electrician on site before you sign. A 200 amp panel with available breakers clears in 20 minutes. A 100 amp panel built in 1985 does not. Know this number before it is a post-delivery surprise. Question 3. What percentage of your charging will realistically happen at home? If the answer is below 70%, run the public charging math at 48 cents per kilowatt hour, not the home rate. The fuel savings at that number may not support the purchase premium. Question 4. What does Edmunds True Cost to Own show for 5-year resale on this specific model and trim? Not the manufacturer's residual estimate, Edmunds' actual tracked resale data. If the 5-year depreciation gap versus a comparable gas vehicle exceeds $5,000, that number has to survive the fuel savings math. Question 5. What does the manufacturer's next generation roadmap look like? A new version releasing within 18 months will reset the market's price reference for your current model immediately on launch. Check the manufacturer's announced product pipeline before you sign a purchase agreement. Robert Mensah, Columbus. 2023 Kia Niro EV purchased for $39,500. Ran all 5 questions before delivery. Insurance quote came in $290 above his current vehicle. Panel cleared on the first electrician visit. Charger installed for $950. Edmunds' 5-year resale projection was within $2,000 of a comparable gas Kia. Kia's announced update cycle was 2 to 3 years. I had every number before I signed. There were no surprises. 14 months in, every projection is holding. I am saving $1,600 a year in fuel. The math works because I checked the math. The fuel savings are $10,000 to $12,000 over 5 years. The 5 costs that nobody shows you in the comparison calculator add up to $9,100 to $16,000, depending on your specific situation. The gap between those 2 ranges is not a reason to avoid an EV. It is a reason to run 5 questions before you commit instead of 4 months after. If you own an EV, drop the one cost in the comments that surprised you most after you signed. The community's real-world data is the most useful thing this video can generate. Next video, the engine oil brands putting full synthetic on the label while using base oils that lose their protective chemistry before your next oil change, and the Walmart oil that outperformed them in a 50,000-mile test. Watch it before your next oil change.